Welcome to African Folktales by Tammy. Please don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more interesting stories. Also share this story to someone who might be interested. Let's get into the story. In the vibrant town of Ezinwa, surrounded by lush greenery and rolling hills, Moses Nwafo was a name that commanded respect. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a booming voice that seemed to echo through the marketplace whenever he spoke. His wealth was legendary, and his successes were the kind that inspired both admiration and envy. Moses owned vast lands that stretched beyond the town's boundaries, a fleet of cars that glistened under the sun, and the grandest house in Ezinwa, a mansion with gleaming white walls and a gate so tall it seemed to touch the sky. The townsfolk often spoke of Moses with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Moses has the Midas touch, they would say. Everything he lays his hands on turns to gold. His confidence, or what many mistook for arrogance, only added to his mystique. He would stroll through the marketplace, greeting traders with an air of authority, his gait firm and purposeful. People would bow or nod in respect, some hoping to gain his favor, others simply wanting to be associated with his success. But behind Moses' towering pride stood a quiet, unassuming figure, his wife Lydia. Lydia was the complete opposite of her husband. While Moses thrived on public admiration, Lydia found joy in the simplicity of family life. She was a gentle soul with a heart big enough to carry the burdens of those she loved. Her beauty was understated, but her inner strength shone brighter than any jewel Moses could buy. Despite her reserved nature, Lydia's wisdom often rivaled that of the town elders. Moses and Lydia had been married for over a decade, and their union was a blend of love and struggle. Lydia had supported Moses from his humble beginnings, standing by him through the early days of hardship. Yet as Moses' wealth grew, so did his pride. He began to view his success as a product of his own brilliance, dismissing Lydia's contributions as mere background noise. Lydia, he often said, you don't need to worry about business. That's my domain. Just enjoy the fruits of my labor. Lydia would smile politely, but deep inside she knew that Moses' confidence bordered on recklessness. She had learned to pick her battles carefully, offering advice only when she felt it was necessary. However, Moses' pride made it difficult for him to listen. He thrived on bold moves and risky investments, often gambling with their fortune in the hopes of doubling it. To him, playing it safe was a sign of weakness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills of Ezinwa, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Moses called for a family meeting. Lydia and their 2 children gathered in the grand living room, their eyes fixed on him as he stood at the center like a general addressing his troops. I have exciting news, he announced, his voice filled with confidence. I'm launching a massive export business. This will be the biggest venture I've ever undertaken. Within a year, we'll be wealthier than we ever imagined. Lydia's heart sank. She had heard of this plan before, but hearing it aloud filled her with unease. Moses, she said cautiously, are you sure about this? It sounds risky. What if, Lydia, he interrupted, waving his hand dismissively, leave business to men? I've already done the calculations. This venture will change our lives. But what if the market? Enough! Moses boomed, silencing her. You need to trust me, Lydia said no more. She knew that arguing with Moses when he was in this state was futile. Instead, she prayed silently, hoping that her husband's ambition would not lead them to ruin. That night, Moses celebrated his decision with friends and business associates, toasting to a future of unparalleled success. Meanwhile, Lydia sat alone in their bedroom, her thoughts heavy with worry. The elders of Ezinwa often said, the tree that stands too tall invites the storm. She couldn't shake the feeling that Moses was standing far too tall. For Moses, failure was not an option. His pride had built an empire, and he believed it would sustain him. But Lydia, with her quiet intuition, could sense the storm brewing on the horizon. She just didn't know how soon it would strike or how devastating it would be. The storm came swiftly, like an unexpected thunderclap on a clear day. Moses' grand export business, the venture he believed would crown him as the wealthiest man in Ezinwa, began to crumble before it even had the chance to take root. The global market shifted and unforeseen challenges arose. International buyers pulled out, shipments were delayed, and costs soared beyond control. At first, Moses dismissed these setbacks as minor hurdles. Every great businessman faces challenges, he told himself. He poured more money into the business, borrowing heavily to keep it afloat. He sold a portion of his lands, confident that he could buy them back once the profits started rolling in. But the profits never came. Within months, the creditors began to circle like vultures. Banks froze his accounts, suppliers demanded payments, and lawsuits threatened to engulf him. Moses, once the proudest man in Izinwa, found himself cornered. His fleet of cars was seized one by one, the grand mansion sold to cover debts. The townsfolk, who once bowed in admiration, now whispered behind his back. "Did you hear Moses Nwafor has lost everything? He built his house on pride," another would say. And pride never withstands the rain. Moses felt the weight of their judgment. Each glance from his neighbors, each murmured conversation, cut deeper than the last. He avoided the marketplace entirely, taking back roads and alleys to escape the prying eyes of the town. The worst blow came when Moses was forced to move his family into a small rundown house on the outskirts of Izinwa. The house was a far cry from the sprawling mansion they once called home. Its roof leaked when it rained, and the walls painted years ago were now faded and peeling. Moses could barely look at Lydia or the children. He couldn't bear the disappointment in their eyes, even though they never voiced it. Lydia, as always, remained calm, her demeanor steady despite the storm that had engulfed them. But Moses' pride wouldn't allow him to lean on her. Instead, he withdrew into himself, spending hours staring out of the small window in their living room, consumed by regret and self-pity. "Moses," Lydia said one evening as she prepared a modest dinner of yam porridge, "you cannot carry this alone. Let us talk about how we can rebuild." "There's nothing to talk about," he replied sharply, his voice laced with frustration. "I am the man of this house. It's my responsibility to fix this." "But Moses," Lydia pressed gently, "sometimes even the strongest trees need support to stand after a storm." Moses shot her a glare. "I don't need support. I'll find a way out of this. Just give me time." Lydia said no more. She had learned that Moses' pride was his greatest weakness, and trying to challenge it would only push him further into his shell. Instead, she resolved to act in silence, to do what needed to be done for the sake of their children and their future. As the days turned into weeks, Moses' despair deepened. He began to avoid the family, ashamed of his failure. His once confident stride became a shuffling walk, his booming voice reduced to muttered words. He was a shadow of the man he had once been. But where Moses saw only failure, Lydia saw an opportunity. She knew that the man she had married was still inside, buried beneath layers of pride and pain. And while Moses wallowed in his despair, Lydia quietly began to lay the foundation for their family's survival. The elders of Izinwa often said, "When the lion sleeps, it is the lioness who guards the pride." Lydia was ready to take on that role, even if it meant doing so in secret. She would not let her family fall, not while she still had breath in her body. As Moses sat in the darkened corner of their small living room, his head in his hands, Lydia lit a candle in the kitchen. The flame flickered against the night, a small but steady light in the face of overwhelming darkness. It was a symbol of her determination, her resolve. For Moses the fall was far from over, but for Lydia it was the beginning of a quiet revolution, a plan that would change everything, even if her husband didn't yet realize it. In the small dimly lit house on the outskirts of Izinwa, Lydia woke before dawn each day. While Moses remained ensnared in his pride and despair, she took it upon herself to keep their family afloat. She rose quietly, careful not to wake the children, and tied her wrapper firmly around her waist before stepping into the brisk morning air. The marketplace was already stirring when she arrived, its familiar hum a comforting reminder of her purpose. Lydia began selling akara, crispy, golden bean cakes that filled the air with a mouth-watering aroma. The job was grueling. She spent hours frying over a hot fire, her hands working tirelessly as the sun climbed higher. But she persisted, knowing that each coin she earned was a step towards securing her family's future. From her small akara stand, Lydia observed the world with sharp eyes and a quiet determination. She noticed the traders' laughter, the children running errands for their parents, and the whispers of pity directed toward her. That's Moses' wife, some would say, shaking their heads. How far they've fallen. Lydia ignored them. She had no time for their words. Her mission was clear, to rebuild what Moses' bride had torn apart. By the afternoon, Lydia would pack up her Akara stand and head to her second job, cleaning houses for wealthier families in Ezinwa. The work was humbling, but she carried herself with dignity, treating every task as a stepping stone. At night, after putting the children to bed, she would light a candle and sit by the window, sewing clothes for additional income. It was during one of these long quiet nights that she was visited by Chief Nadozi, an old family friend and respected retired merchant. The chief had heard of Moses' misfortune and had come to offer his support, not to Moses, but to Lydia. "I see you, Lydia," he said, his voice heavy with admiration. "You're fighting harder than anyone knows." Lydia smiled softly, grateful for his words. "Chief, I have no choice. My children must eat. They must have a future." Chief Nadozi leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "You've always been a wise woman. I believe in your strength and your vision. If you're willing, I can help you start something bigger, a palm oil business. It won't be easy, but I have no doubt you can succeed." Lydia hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with possibilities. She thought of Moses, his pride still unbroken, and wondered how he would react if he knew. But then she looked at her children, their faces peaceful in sleep, and her resolve hardened. "I'll do it," she said firmly. With Chief Nadozi's guidance, Lydia began buying small quantities of palm oil, which she sold in nearby villages. Her honesty and determination quickly earned her a loyal customer base. Every coin she earned was carefully saved, every debt meticulously tracked. Her business grew slowly but steadily, fueled by her tireless work ethic and unyielding hope. All the while, Lydia kept her success hidden from Moses. She knew that his pride was both his strength and his weakness, and she feared that revealing her efforts too soon would only deepen the rift between them. Instead, she continued to play the role of the dutiful wife, allowing Moses to believe that their modest survival was a result of his dwindling efforts. But within her heart, Lydia carried the weight of their future. She dreamed of a day when Moses would see her not as a subordinate, but as an equal, his partner in both struggle and triumph. Until then, she would bear the burden in silence, her strength burning quietly like the flame of her candle. As the weeks turned into months, Lydia's business flourished. She began to envision a brighter future for her family, one where they could reclaim their dignity and rebuild their lives. But she also knew that her journey was far from over. The elders of Izinwa often said, "The fire that burns quietly lasts the longest." Lydia was that quiet fire, and she was determined to keep burning, no matter the cost. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth one evening when Moses returned home from another fruitless day of searching for work. His once proud shoulders were slumped, his face drawn with weariness. Inside their small house, the warm glow of a lantern illuminated a surprising sight. The children sat at the wooden table, laughing and eating heartily. The aroma of a rich stew filled the room, the kind of meal they hadn't tasted in months. Moses paused, his eyes scanning the room in disbelief. His gaze landed on Lydia, who stood by the stove, her hands busy with a final dish. She turned to him with a calm smile. "You're back," she said simply, placing a bowl of pounded yam on the table. "Where did this come from?" Moses asked, his voice a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "Sit and eat," Lydia replied. "We'll talk after." Moses obeyed, too hungry and tired to argue. As he ate, his mind swirled with questions. How could Lydia, with their limited means, afford such a feast? He watched her carefully, noticing for the first time how tired she looked. Her hands were calloused, her movements slower than usual, yet her eyes remained steady and determined. After the children were sent to bed, Moses sat across from Lydia, his curiosity boiling over. "Lydia," he began, his tone sharp, "I need to know the truth. Where did you get the money for this?" Lydia met his gaze without flinching. "From my work," she said calmly. "What work?" he demanded, his voice rising. "For months now," she began, her voice measured, "I've been selling akara at the market. Clean houses, I sew clothes at night, and I started a small palm oil business with the help of Chief Nadozi." Moses froze, his mind struggling to process her words. You started a business without telling me? Yes, Lydia replied firmly, because I knew your pride wouldn't allow it. While you were drowning in regret, I was working to keep this family alive. Her words hit Moses like a blow. He looked down at his hands, calloused and empty, and then at Lydia, who sat across from him like a quiet storm. Do you know what it's been like for me? He said, his voice barely above a whisper. To lose everything? To be reduced to this. And do you know what it's been like for me? Lydia countered, her tone sharper now. To watch you wallow in your pride while I carried the weight of this family? To sacrifice my own dignity so our children could eat. Moses, this isn't just your burden. It's ours. Moses felt the heat rise in his chest. He wanted to argue, to push back, but the truth of her words silenced him. For the first time, he saw Lydia not as his quiet wife, but as the pillar holding their family together. I didn't want to hide this from you, Lydia continued, her voice softening. But I needed to act for the sake of our children. For the sake of us. Tears welled in Moses' eyes. The pride that had been his shield for so long now felt like a chain, heavy and constricting. He looked at Lydia and saw her strength, her resilience, and her unwavering love for their family. I'm sorry, he said, his voice cracking. I let my pride blind me. I let you carry this alone. Lydia reached across the table and placed her hand on his. You're not alone, Moses. You never were. But you need to let go of your pride. We can rebuild together. Moses nodded, his heart heavy with regret but also with a newfound determination. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of hope. Lydia had done what he could not. She had saved their family. And now he was ready to join her, to stand beside her, and to learn from her strength. That night, Moses lay awake, his mind buzzing with possibilities. He had fallen, yes, but Lydia had shown him that it was possible to rise again. And this time he would rise not as a proud man, but as a humbled one. The dawn of a new day in Ezinwa brought with it a quiet resolve in Moses' heart. For months he had been consumed by pride, regret, and self-pity, but Lydia's revelation had ignited something within him, a spark of humility and determination to redeem himself. He rose early that morning, joining Lydia in the kitchen as she prepared akara to sell at the market. Let me help, Moses said awkwardly, picking up a bowl of beans. Lydia looked at him, surprised but pleased. It's not as easy as it looks, she warned with a small smile. I'll learn, Moses replied. The first few hours were clumsy. Moses burned his fingers, spilled batter, and nearly knocked over the frying pan. But Lydia's patience never wavered. She guided him gently, showing him the techniques she had mastered over months of hard work. By the time the sun climbed higher in the sky, Moses had successfully fried his first batch of akara. At the market, Moses' presence caused a stir. The once proud businessman, who had strolled through the town in fine clothes and luxury cars, was now standing behind a modest stall, selling akara alongside his wife. The townsfolk whispered among themselves, some mocking, others marveling at his transformation. Is that really Moses Nuafo? A trader asked. It is, another replied, shaking his head. Pride brought him low, but look at him now. He's learning humility. Moses ignored the whispers, focusing instead on the customers who lined up to buy their akara. He watched Lydia interact with them, her warmth and sincerity drawing people in. For the first time, he truly appreciated her strength and the sacrifices she had made for their family. When they returned home that evening, tired but satisfied, Moses sat with Lydia to review her business ledger. He was impressed by her meticulous records and the steady growth of her palm oil business. You've built something incredible, he said, his voice filled with admiration. We've built something, Lydia corrected. I couldn't have done it without Chief Nardo's guidance or without the prayers and support of our children. Moses nodded, humbled once again. I want to be a part of this, he said. I want to help you grow this business. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. Over the following weeks, Moses and Lydia worked together to expand the palm oil business. Moses used his connections and negotiation skills to secure better deals with suppliers, while Lydia continued to oversee the daily operations. They traveled to neighboring towns, selling their products and building relationships with new clients. As the business flourished, so did their bond. Moses began to see Lydia not as a silent partner in his life, but as a true equal, someone whose wisdom and resilience had carried their family through the darkest times. The transformation in Moses did not go unnoticed by the people of Ezinwa. The man who had once been the epitome of pride was now a picture of humility and hard work. He no longer cared about the whispers or the judgment of others. His focus was on his family and their shared future. One afternoon, while delivering a shipment of palm oil to a neighboring village, Moses turned to Lydia and said, "I used to think that wealth was the most important thing. But now I see that it's family, love, and resilience that truly matter." "You've taught me that, Lydia." Lydia smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "And you've taught me that even the tallest trees can bend when the storm comes. What matters is that they stand again." The two shared a quiet moment of understanding, their partnership stronger than ever. Together, they were rebuilding their lives not on the shaky foundation of pride, but on the solid ground of humility, trust, and love. As the sun set over the hills of Zinwa that evening, casting a golden glow over the land, Moses and Lydia walked hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held. For the first time in a long time, they felt truly at peace. Months turned into a year, and the once broken Nwafor family had risen from the ashes of despair. Moses and Lydia's palm oil business was thriving, now serving not just Izinwa, but neighboring towns as well. The small rundown house that had once symbolized their fall was now a bustling hub of activity, a place of hope, growth, and new beginnings. Moses had transformed. The man who once believed his wealth defined him had learned the true value of resilience, partnership, and humility. Early every morning, he joined Lydia in their growing venture, overseeing operations, managing deliveries, and negotiating deals. In the evenings, he would sit with the children, sharing stories of their struggles and triumphs, instilling in them lessons he had learned the hard way. Lydia, as always, remained the backbone of their family. Her quiet strength and wisdom continued to guide their path, but now she had a partner in Moses who truly valued her. Together, they were an unstoppable force, rebuilding not just their fortunes but also their relationship and their place in the community. One day, as they were loading a shipment of palm oil onto a cart, an elder from Izinwa approached them. His face bore the lines of a life well lived, and his eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Moses," the elder began, "your journey has been the talk of the town. From the height of pride to the depth of despair, and now to this, your family standing tall again. What has changed?" Moses looked at Lydia, who gave him a small nod. He turned back to the elder, his voice steady and sincere. "What changed," Moses said, "was me. I thought wealth made a man, but I was wrong. It's love, humility, and the strength of family that truly matters. When I lost everything, I thought I was alone. But Lydia never gave up on me. She carried us when I couldn't, and she taught me that pride is nothing compared to the power of partnership." The elder nodded, a satisfied smile spreading across his face. "Well said, Moses. You've learned what many men never do. Ezinwa is proud of you." Word of Moses and Lydia's story spread beyond Ezinwa, becoming a tale of redemption and resilience told by firesides and in marketplaces. People came from far and wide to hear the story of the man who had lost everything and the woman whose love had saved him. They marveled at how Lydia's quiet determination had rebuilt their family, and how Moses had embraced humility to rise again. As their business grew, Moses and Lydia began to give back to their community. They hired workers from struggling families, offering them fair wages and teaching them the values of hard work and collaboration. They donated to local schools and helped fund community projects, ensuring that Ezinwa prospered alongside them. One evening, as the family sat together under the star-filled sky, Moses turned to Lydia. "You saved me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just from financial ruin, but from myself. I owe everything to you," Lydia smiled, taking his hand in hers. "You saved yourself, Moses. You chose to change, to grow, and to fight for our family. That's all I ever wanted." Their children, now old enough to understand the weight of their parents' journey, looked on with admiration. They saw in their parents not just role models but living proof that love and resilience could overcome any challenge. The elders of Ezinwa often said, "When two stones grind together in unity, they can break the hardest nut." Moses and Lydia were those stones stronger together, united by their struggles and triumphs. From the depths of despair, the Numwafo family had risen higher than ever, not in material wealth, but in the richness of their love and the strength of their bond. And so their story became a timeless lesson in humility, resilience, and the enduring power of love. Moral of the story: true wealth is not measured in material possessions, but in the strength of love, humility, and resilience. We've come to the end of this story. Please subscribe to my channel to support me. Thank you.